But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you. We're really, really excited for this session today. If you haven't had the pleasure of seeing Mark Shin present before, you are going to be in for an awesome ride today. So Mark is really one of the founding fathers of MTSS, so to speak. He and also in terms of data driven problem solving for making for understanding students who may have a learning disability. He's also been, a leading contributor to the creation of curriculum-based measurements, which have been, widely so important for this work and helping to understand student growth. I always knew that you were one of the ones who worked with Stan Dino on the creation of Dibbles. I didn't know that you were actually the person who named Dibbles. I just found that out today. And so thank you for that acronym. It's certainly much more enjoyable than all the SRSSS, SIE, SSRSS world of behavior assessments. So appreciate that name. And apart from that, Branching Minds has really been fortunate to work with Mark throughout the years. Really, you've gotten to know him over the past 8 years, and he has just been instrumental in helping us think about MTSS and approaching this work in the right way. And so we are endlessly appreciative for the work that he has done in the field, and I'm super excited to kick things over to him.
Okay, is there anybody here?
There's so many people here. There's 123 people here, but now that I'm back on your screen, I see that you are not sharing your screen. You're sharing the cloud link with the demo, not the PowerPoint or not the keynote.
Okay, I hit share, open share menu, share screen. I hit share window. And then I how about that?
There it is. That is working. Though wait, it's not the right one. We need the one that says that starts with Branching Minds, do less, and then has Eva edits at the end, because this is the one with that white text.
This is the one that says Branching Minds. This is the one that says Branching Minds, do less, Eva edits.
It looks like the top, if you scroll down to slide 22, we can see, but it looks like the name of the one is the original one. If you look at slide 22, we can see if there's the white text. While we're here with everybody and trying to sort this out, in the spirit of doing less in terms of supporting effective MTSS, it'd be awesome if people can put in the chat kind of what is the one critical, simple pieces of MTSS practice that you think is really helpful or critical for us to focus on, just to start getting us in the mindset of the day or the session. Do you want me to actually run the deck? I can share my screen.
Yeah, I'm going to open it up again, make sure it is. We've got... This looks like it. Let's go to slide 22. For the life of me. Okay, now it can't do anything but open up the one you sent me.
Okay.
Okay, there's slide 22.
We've got a good crowd.
Okay, there it is. Otherwise, we go because this is it.
It's not sharing anymore, but do you want me to just share my screen?
No, because I have to have some modicum of
Okay.
something here. Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine.
We'll get to it.
We've got some good discussion going on in the chat. Thank you,
Good.
everybody. Making it doable for staff. That is 100% going to be a theme of the talk today.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so where's my thing that I want to share?
Efficiency and clear guidance. Yeah, big part of making it doable for staff. There we go. We got it.
Yep.
It's the right one.
All the way to here.
Woohoo! All right. Thank you all for your
patience.
Okay, gang.
So sorry.
Awesome.
Live or die by the sword of technology. So, yeah, this is a phrase that I've heard repeated a number of times over the years. And, I grew up in Minnesota where we're incredibly pragmatic. And the irony is a good share of what ultimately has become MTSS started in a reasonably small rural co-op about 60 miles north of the Twin Cities, and evolved out of ultimately some work in St. Paul where I worked, and then moved over across the river to Minneapolis where a group of people expanded it. We drove north to a place that was called Pine County where they were doing this work, and took it and expanded it. And then all of a sudden people from Iowa came, and then people from Pennsylvania came. And it was really an exciting time in the early 80s where things were rapidly expanding for reasons that I think it's important to understand. Now, you've got some learning objectives here, and I really hope that we might be able to explore some things that can make MTSS more time and cost efficient. Okay, and I hope we can think about some of the things that we can do to become better at. Okay, I want you to take away this idea that it's better to do a few things really well than a lot of things less well. Everything's important, right? But not everything is equally important. Okay, and then I hope you can start to think maybe that there are some things that we've missed. Okay, and then boy, I hope we can leave with a sense of, hey, you know what? Hey, you know what? Maybe we should. And that's a stronger sense of advocacy and empowerment, because, it's time to stand up a little bit and say, especially with some of the mandates, which I think are well-intentioned, but we have the potential to blow it here. Okay, and I worry again that we're going to blow it like we've blown it before. Okay, if you look at your handouts, I'm not going to go through this, but I believe that everybody who presents, okay, should have a written statement about potential conflicts of interest. Okay, the only conflict of interest I can really think of is if somebody would want to pay me for my opinion, okay, or staff development. I still am on the National Advisory Board for the Consortium on Reaching Excellence. That's CORE, that does some of the best staff development. Not me, I don't do it, but they have consultants who work to train teachers and administrators in things that are really important. They're unbelievable. And they convene a group of us with people who are a lot smarter than me. We sit around the table and talk for a day or two sometimes about what's best practice in reading, what's best practice in language arts, what works best for students who are second language learners or multiple language learners or older kids, younger kids. It's an amazing day. It makes my head hurt. And I just always wonder how we got in the room with all these smart people. So that's me. And you can tell I got white hair and I'm old and fat. And that's because I've been around a long time. You know, I've been through it all. I've got more scars on my back and on my head from early implementation. Boy, I've been yelled at a lot. You know, the director of special ed pointing his finger at me in public as an employee and tell me because we didn't identify enough kids as kids with cognitive disabilities, it was my fault that we laid off 4 teachers. Here we improved outcomes for a whole lot of kids, and he was, you know, I felt bad. We lost teachers' jobs, but students learned a lot. Okay, I have scars. You know, I'm probably less successful than anybody I know in terms of getting change, but I'm still working. As we evolved, you know, this effort, we have done things differently. We've learned an awful lot about implementation. You know, we made mistakes. We backtracked. We've come out of things that I think have helped us refine implementation. I've been around in 45 states, worked with the Bureau of Indian Education, talk about an experience there with really great outcomes, and kind of went away. And I even worked in a youth prison where less than 3% of kids were identified as kids with disabilities, but yet almost all the persons in the system couldn't read very well. And then I bounced in and out of Chicago Public Schools since 1991, 6 months as their RTI consultant, and I was appointed one of the members of the mayor of Chicago's task force to improve literacy in CPS, Chicago Public Schools. We wrote a really nice report on how to improve outcomes for kids with disabilities in 2018. I've got it somewhere if anybody would care to read it. I don't think they implemented very much of it, if anything at all. So, and then over the years, I've been able to gather money for, you know, training people, primarily training people, school psychologists to be doing this stuff. And they work in about 30 states. I think they've done a very fine job of being implementers. They work and have been a generation of training others too. So this is me now. Okay. So here's some of my big ideas. Okay. One of the challenges when people have been implementing RTI, they've rarely had a clean slate, you know, where you can go up and do implementation with no other things going on. Okay. It's always been an add-on to something else, but it's always had to have these features. Okay. You always had to have tiers, right? MTSS has tiers. It has teams. It has screening. It has benchmarking. It has data days. Oh my God, data days have to go. It has problem analysis. Why does this kid have reading problems? What's our hypotheses? Here's my hypothesis. The kid can't read. Why? Probably didn't get the right instruction at the right time. Probably the curriculum isn't very good. Okay, we're done. And boy, forms? Really? Do we need forms? Oh boy. So what I think we've ended up is that proverbial camel which is a horse designed by too many teams. And that's not anybody's fault. It's probably my fault, those consultants that we bring in to help us make a better system. But boy, it's gotten cumbersome, and I think we need to be flexible. So here's what I'd like to do today, if we can. Let's just think a little bit. What can we do to unshackle, take a step back and think a little bit? There's this phrase that I love. We can standardize the process, but customize the implementation. I worked in a district where one of the schools was at the typical elementary kid in reading was at the 84th percentile. The typical kid was at the 84th percentile. But yet, maybe 5-6 miles down the road, the typical kid was at the 20th percentile. 5 miles. Typical kid was an exceptional reader. 5 miles down the road, a typical kid was well below average and needed intervention. But yet the same reading program delivered the same way. Okay? And Title I services kind of the same way. That was crazy. They can't do the same thing the same way. You need to customize how the services are provided. And I hope I can give you some examples of that today. So let's just consider the case of tiers. Good grief. Who says everything has to be 3 tiers? Now, you can go some places, and some states have 4 tiers, 5 tiers. And when I hear that, I just got to say, that just brings me to tears. So let's just even think about these tiers. And what really makes me mad is when people put numbers in there. And those numbers, by the way, somebody pulled them out of a hat. That was a mental health model from 30, 40 years ago. And they started saying 5% of kids should be in tier 3. Well, just think about that for 1 minute. We already have 15% of kids in our country 15% of kids identified as kids with disabilities. Are they outside of that tier? Or are they in tier 3, but that would be 15% that we're supposed to have 5%? Wait a minute. It kind of screws up the math, doesn't it? So the idea, and I expressed this quite a few years ago, 13 years ago in a chapter with Hill Walker, that tier 1 is, people are starting to get it, is tier 1 is supposed to meet the needs of most of our kids. Tier 2 is supposed to meet the needs of fewer kids, and tier 3 is supposed to meet the needs of even fewer kids. But let's not get locked into that. Here's my idea. How about this one? Who says we have to have 3 tiers? I'm a big fan of considering a 2-tier model, grades K1 or K2. I got to close my door because I got a barking dog. I think kindergarten and K1, you have kids that need intervention or don't need intervention, okay? And what would happen if we really coordinated our resources so we could provide really intensive intervention for kindergartners, first graders who really needed intervention in a powerful way? And as we get older kids, and do we really need tier 3 and 10th grade, 11th grade? And what about tiers at all? A kid in their senior year, what are we even trying to think about or accomplish? I know secondary lags behind, but it shouldn't. And implementation in many ways is much easier at the high school level. And we don't have time to talk about that today, but let's liberate ourselves from, we have to have the same number of tiers even at different settings, okay? And when we think about this, who says we're locked in? Okay, you can do things like this, and oh boy, tier 3 can't be kids with IEPs. Why can't tier 3 be kids that have IEPs? Why can't it? Okay, why can't be in, well, tier 3 isn't special ed. Why not? Okay, if it doesn't have to be called tier 3, it can be a 2-tier model, and if kids are not benefiting from appropriately intensive intervention at tier 2 and they need more, then maybe they need an IEP. But we're locked into this thinking that it's taboo. Is that in the law? No, it's nobody. Okay, so let's be free. Now, I'm not advocating that you have to do that, but think about the resources you have. I would much rather have appropriately intensive tier 2 than a wimpy tier 2 that's provided by tier 1 general ed classroom teachers. Because then what we're doing is burdening classroom teachers, going through the motions and losing their support for a multi-tier model. We're hoop jumping and losing what we really want to have as value. A commitment to a multi-tier model that's appropriately diversified and individualized to meet all kids' needs. Think about it, because providing appropriately intensive intervention is a system for everyone, gang. And here's the thing that I'd like people to take away. When we say multi-tiered system of supports, I'd like that system of supports to be considered not just for students, but that system of supports is a system of supports for teachers. Okay? That we're not building this just for kids. We're building it for teachers. Did you know a kid who reads better is easier to teach? Did you know that a kid whose class has implemented the universal, the PACSIS, the good behavior game, a kid who's been in a classroom with that's been implemented, that kid and others is easier to teach? Did you know that a kid that has been in a tier 2 program, and let's say they've been using SIPS, an appropriate early intervention program for reading, did you know that that kid is going to be easier to teach? Or a class of kids that's been doing really targeted school class-wide study skills through Anita Archer's work, those kids are going to be easier to teach wherever they are as they progress through middle school and high school. See, that makes easier to teach, makes it easier for teachers. So think about the tiers. Think about this. Build a system that ensures as little delay as possible. Lordy, I'm not a big fan of anymore of problem-solving teams at tier 1. I'm not a big fan of teachers coming to the problem-solving team that meets once a week that talks about individual kids to death and asks teachers to bring in their data so we can talk about John, and then send the teacher back to bring in more data. If we don't have data already on John, good grief, then it's our problem. We don't want to talk about John. We should know about John already. If we don't know about John already, shame on us, okay? And if it's a behavior problem, that behavior problem, let's talk about functional, let's go out and do an FBA. Look at gang. Most kids are, the function is escape, avoidance, or, some type of gain. So you should have a bag of tricks already in place. Your school psychologist or social worker should know how to deliver it. A good tier 2 intervention should be aligned to your school-wide behavior supports. Oh, Lord, you should have something right away to be able to implement. And FBA will just take, and you'll come back indecisive, implement, okay? So I don't like this talking at here. I believe most of the talking should be done at grade level teams with targeted support by administrators and service providers, including the school psychologist and speech and language. And they can meet once a month to talk about how things are going. But I'm not a big fan of talking at tier 2 forever, okay? Because talking at tier 1, every minute in a meeting is a minute that could be devoted to intervention. And if we get up to tier 3, boy, look, how much time are we spending in meetings? Meetings. We have to talk less. And I'm not a fan of timekeepers. I'm not a fan of all the things that we're doing. If we need a timekeeper, we have a time problem. And we need to manage our talk. By the way, if anybody at a meeting that's not a mom talks about mom or talks about dad, we need to clean up our language because that is not good language. Only the mom is the mom. So mom doesn't do anything in our professional language. That's inappropriate and condescending. We should be able to triage. Triage means if a kid needs tier 2, they get tier 2. If a kid needs tier 3, they don't spend time in purgatory. Tier 2 is not purgatory. Time they spend there waiting to fail so they get to go to tier 3. You look at your data, and if kids are in their bottom quarter, they are good candidates for tier 2. And if kids are in your bottom 10%, get them in an appropriately intensive intervention as soon as possible. These are my recommended. You can have your own. My recommended cut scores. If a kid in reading is in your bottom 10 percentile, don't put them in tier 2. Put them in appropriately intervention in tier 3. Okay? Or build your tier 2 intervention powerful enough to be able to reach kids that low. I want us to really focus on building MTSS so it's not built on the backs of general ed teachers. You should be getting a theme that I want general ed teachers to be knowledgeable, and that means we need to do more professional learning now than we've done before. More professional learning on the components of what is good reading instruction. Because if you are someone who's not been trained in the science of reading, we all need to get trained or retrained. And I'm not joking, because I've learned more about reading and how reading works in the last 7 years than I've learned in my previous whatever, I'm not going to tell you. Okay? We need to be humble and accept the fact that we have been led or misled about how reading, how kids learn to read. This is not an agricultural model where all you need is a good book, okay? It's not even all you need is a good teacher, okay? It's a good curriculum and a good informed teacher, okay? That's going to be the key. All right, so think about how you're staffing your tier 3 right now. Because I like to do things like take inventory. If I talk about things in terms of trying to do less, I need to look about what's going on right now. And one of the things I like to ask is not only what is your core program, but I also like to ask, how are you staffing tier 2 now? And if this is my answer, the general teacher does it. They do more within their class, no additional resources. Okay, so if the answer is the general teacher goes to the team and they send the teacher and the kid back to the classroom and say, here's what you need to do, okay, and it consists of, asking, spending, that, the teacher may think about and respond with, you know what, that's more work. And you know what it is? What the correct response is? Yes, it is. It is more work. Do we have to do it that way? Now, just think of some of the options. Oop, wrong way, gang. Now, these are some of the options, gang. Now, there may not be recommended options, but you know what? You could do flexible skill grouping across classes within a grade. Different reading groups. Oh, no, skill grouping is bad. Not if it's flexible skill grouping with, across classes within a grade. All you need to do is teach kids about transitions, which is kind of an important thing that kids should learn. And flexible skill grouping means kids should be progress monitored and adjustments should be made when they are improving. Now, everything comes with pros and cons, gang, and I'm not recommending this, but to me, this is called differentiated instruction. You could do this with or without because of MTSS. You could do flexible skill grouping across classes, across grades. Oh no, some kids will feel bad. Well, how about this? Getting an IEP and getting a label for your whole life, that might make kids feel bad too. You could do this, provide a before school and after school program. Now, I know this has pros and cons too, but you could consider it. How about this? You could provide computerized interventions. I have mixed feelings about them. Like I have mixed feelings about each and every one of these. You could create what they do in Tennessee called skinny blocks, where you carve out a period of the day where everybody gets intervention. Pros and cons of that. Cons being, there's often not enough time to really intervene appropriately intensively. With a program that's 40 minutes and your skinny block is 25 minutes, hard to deliver the intervention as planned that way. But if that's the only way you're going to do it, well, that's what you get. Or how about this? This is what I like. All hands on deck. This takes central decision makers, not just a school staff, but it takes leadership. And that leadership has coordinated remedial resource people. Your Title I, if you got them, your reading specialists, if you got them, your English learners, if you got them, your highly trained paraprofessionals, if you got them. And you take as many of those people and you get them as trained as possible, and that is your support crowd. That could be speech and language. They are excellent in terms of early reading instruction. And what these people do is they descend on early reading and the elementary grades, even through grade 6 or grade 7, and they become your tier 2 or tier 3 interventionists with really strong programs. And they solve the problem as soon as it appears, and they help take the burden off general ed teachers. It takes central office decision makers to build this, okay, to coordinate, to make sure it's okay. Now, ultimately it becomes a scheduling problem. Good. Now, of course, this is my favorite, but people have to get along. Okay? People have to be willing to challenge. Okay? Now, my assessment observations. If you want to save some time, make some big decisions on assessment. This is my area of supposed expertise. By the way, it's the DIBS part that was my contribution, not the ELS, the DIBS part. Like screening 3 times a year. Gang, we got to get over that. We're not screening 3 times a year. We're benchmarking 3 times a year, but we're not screening 3 times a year. Okay? The notion that we're collecting multiple measures 3 times a year, that's goofy. Okay? We're collecting multiple measures for multiple years. Now, again, I'm an assessment person. This is adding additional diagnostic information intended for instructional planning. Now, just think about it. All of that data. It's inundating teachers and teams with data. So let's say we give information on 10, 15 subtests, and the teacher's got 25 kids. Okay, think of all that data piling up, giving teachers profiles, and I'm supposed to make sense of this and develop individual teaching plans for every single kid. First, that's not good practice. It's not good practice from a research perspective. Those profiles are not reliable, for one. It's just inconsistent with what we know. Don't do that. And think of the time and money. Now, those data may be relevant for some kids, but not for every kid. And the odd thing is, where we need data most is we're probably getting it the least. Like if you look at your IEPs, are we getting high quality progress monitoring? It's sort of like legally required, that you've got a good data system. And then we actually use data for progress monitoring. That's where we really need to be using data. Our benchmark data to be looking across for progress. That's why you monitor 3 times a year, for progress, not to look for kids screening 3 times a year. The progress is what matters. So, is a good reader likely to be at risk at the next benchmark? No. But the question is, are they making progress? Are they making progress? At the next grade, are they likely to be at risk? No. But are they making progress? We need to put the word progress in our vocabulary. We're not looking for pathology. And that's what benchmarking is turned into. And that's what our MTSS is turned into, looking for pathology rather than progress. And when we give these data, should we think that we're using these data with any notion that a teacher is going to look at these data and plan instruction. That's crazy, right? Your instruction be planned on the information you have from your core reading program. And if your core reading program, based on science of reading, doesn't give you some information on what to teach and how to teach it, you don't have a good reading program. Now, in the old days, I hope, when you didn't have a core programming that was any good, okay, in the days of so-called balanced literacy where you didn't have much data, or the data you had from Fontes Pinnell benchmark, which was not reliable and valid, gang, and I know that's going to offend some people. Maybe then you needed some data, okay? But in today's world, you shouldn't need those data anymore. Your program should give you those data. So, we're overwhelming them, especially at the end of the year. You're giving them all these data at the end of the year. It's the end of the year. Kids are going to go to, okay. So the science. This is from Amanda Vanderheyden and a bunch of people that she works with. Okay, since 2013, we've known that more than one screening measure in reading is all you need. And that one measure is a good oral reading test. Doing more than that doesn't add anything. It just takes time and money. There's two references right there. And here's a third one. No added accuracy. So why are we collecting more data than an oral reading test? How about this? This is Jack Fletcher, probably, one of the top authorities in the world. And, if you're interested in intervention on dyslexia, kids with reading difficulties, read the second edition of his book, okay, with Lynn Fuchs and Marcia Barnes and Reed Lyon, okay? Read this book. Screening should be reasonably short and catch this, not burdensome for teachers. And even though the measures we're collecting right now, and I have contributed to these data systems, each one is reasonably short, but the collective package is getting too long. We need to be smarter than that. We might collect all those data for some kids, but I don't know that we need those data each time for every kid, okay? We need to be smarter. So, how about this one? The takeaway that I have, especially following Jack's advice, for very young kids, teach first and then test if necessary. And catch this, don't test in order to find out who to teach or what to teach. We need to put more of the assessment resources we have into high quality, appropriately intensive intervention or instruction. Kids in kindergarten should have good programs at the door ready to deliver so they don't have to catch up so much when they come into the upper grades. The World Health Organization has been telling us that screening should be easily and quickly performed, affordable, and get this, reasonably accurate. Doesn't have to be perfect. So I can screen. Let's screen this kid.
Mark, is there supposed to be audio with this? Because we
Well,
actually can't hear it.
yes. Oh, crap. Oops. Bad language. There was a box I was supposed to click somewhere in this thing. You remember that?
I don't.
It was
In
settings.
do you want to give us the summary of what they said?
Yeah. Oh man, this is horrible. I guess I'll give you a summary. Yeah, there's a little button and we clicked it. Remember, it was just a little. Why they have that, I don't know. Just like the dumbest thing ever. Sorry, gang. My bad. Now I got to go find the thing to get my presentation going again. I'm still screen sharing, right?
Yes, it's just not in presentation mode. Oh, here. I unmute, I think. Oh, there's a mute button over your screen share, and I'm not sure how to undo that though.
Yeah. Oh, I got to get back to my presentation.
Yeah, your presentation's up. It's just not being shared, or it's not in presentation mode.
And it's way up there too high. I can't get to the little move forward button. Seriously. Please, it's not letting me. There we go.
Oh, you got it? You were close to the play button.
Where the heck is play?
Over right, you're on it.
Okay,
awesome.
So this is a short video of Billy, okay? The famous Billy. And Billy, you know, what I do with when I show this video of Billy, I typically ask the audience to raise their hand when they have heard enough to be able to make a judgment whether Billy is a reader or a skilled reader or some adjective to say that he is skilled enough to be able to navigate grade 4 text. Okay, and the hands start going up at about 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds. Certainly by 15 seconds, a good share of the hands are up at almost 30 seconds. Almost all the hands are up. It's a 1-minute assessment. Most of you are familiar with it. It's a measure. It's a curriculum-based measure, okay? And compared to 4th graders, pretty much anywhere, the score would place Billy below the 10th percentile. This is a test that has been probably one of the most researched reading tests in the world, okay? And I'm not joking about that. This is a reading test that's used across the world, okay? in countries beyond the United States. It's used as part of national assessments in Korea and Singapore, and it's used in the United Nations assessment of literacy, this thing called curriculum-based measurement that came out of the University of Minnesota, simultaneous with the implementation of what became multi-tiered systems of support. This has been an essential tool in implementation because it was short, reasonably accurate, and reliable and valid. This is an oral reading test. Now, it has been morphed language-wise into oral reading fluency, but people can confuse that with speed. And we backed away, most of us who participated in this research and implementation, from the word F, okay, because people have discounted it in many ways. Well, what about comprehension? And we know the close relationship between oral reading and reading comprehension. And as we think about this, this is really a short oral reading test, okay? If you had kids read aloud for 10 minutes, you wouldn't call it a fluency measure. And this research actually did start out with 10 minutes of reading and 7 minutes of reading and 5 minutes of reading and 3 minutes of reading and 1 minute of reading and even 30 seconds of reading, and which measure worked best as a measure of general reading ability? Well, in fact, they all worked. But if you were a teacher, which one would you rather do? And given that the measurement system was designed for ease of teachers, the choice was made by Stan Dino and his research team to use 1 minute of assessment. Now, the National Reading Panel made it easier for implementation by including reading fluency. I would like to actually use the term of Jay Samuels, which is automaticity of reading, and take this as a short oral reading test. It's really an informal reading inventory on steroids. But let's focus instead on the qualitative features of reading. And when I have persons trained, I have them not only look at the number of words read correctly, but also learn to assess the accuracy of reading, which is secondary. It's not the primary measure. It's secondary. To also evaluate reading with expression or prosody, reading with automaticity, okay? To evaluate whether the student can read with an effective strategy for words they don't know, because students do have strategies like guess and go or skip, okay? Whether they engage in comprehension self-monitoring, fancy word for self-correcting, and whether their pace is adjusted. See, good readers will slow down when the text gets more difficult. And poor readers kind of read at that same slow pace. Now, these are things that are harder to measure. They're called qualitative features, and they add to the overall score. Now, I would really like us as educators to be really good at this, because to me, this is our primary tool in the toolbox through about grade 8, okay? And this is what we get really good at. Now, we could talk about assessing comprehension at a different time, but let's get good at this. Now, Billy's score, he read 59 words correctly. Yes, he did. He read 59 words, I should say. He had 11 errors, and he did read 48 words correct. He had 81% accuracy. Ooh. Yeah, okay. Now here's what we should notice. Across most of the major vendors, okay, these are some of the early reading measures, and look at them all. Oh my goodness. There's a lot of things that we give to kids, okay? And usually many of these things are up to grade 3 and even grade 6. That's a lot of stuff, okay? But one thing they have in common, almost all the assessments are assessing oral reading in some way, shape, or form. I should put on here another column for, let's see, who's next on the, Renaissance is next with their CBM development. But everybody's doing oral reading. Let's get good at it. So I want us to be doing something like this. I want us to be making major decisions about screening actually at the end of the year. You can't do that with kindergarten, but I would like us to focus on end of the year assessment, okay? Because if we focus on beginning of the year, we're wasting time. Now, I did this with principals in North Dakota a couple years ago, and what they really liked was one of the principals stood up and said, hey, Mark, you know, if we started thinking this way, we could actually plan. And that's kind of the whole point. Use your end of the year data to allocate your resources for the next year. Who would be good candidates for tier 2? Who would be good candidates for tier 3? And you can actually schedule your interventions and which kids would be in them approximately. Obviously, you've got newcomers and kids may exit by moving. But boy, you can schedule everything all before school begins and provide intervention from really the first or second week of school. It's amazing how things shift. You become much more organized.
Hey, Mark, I'm going to have to interrupt you because have 2 minutes left, and I know you've got some great content left, and people have had questions.
Oh, good. You can. Oh man.
Well, so in the past, you've been generous enough to offer a follow-up webinar with us, and
yes,
I'd love to bribe you to do that. That way, we can go through kind of what hasn't been covered. People can digest what you've said, and we can come back and do a little bit of Q&A on kind of just with a Branching Minds webinar that we schedule. Is that, not to put you on the spot, we can decide about that later.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Was poorly monitoring and thinking was 12, 15, 12.
Yeah, well, we'll do it on Zoom because we know that we haven't had tech problems with that in the past. So we can make sure we share that out with everyone who has attended the session. I'll make sure we get a list of that and we have all of your emails from when you registered. So we will let you know when that follow-up is scheduled. Any parting last words from you, Mark, in the last minute that we have?
Yeah, let's do this as well. If people have, because I couldn't see the chat.
Yeah.
If people have questions in the chat, yeah, you can send those questions to me.
Yep, I've already been saving them so that we can send those to you ahead of time, and people can definitely bring your questions too.
And if you want, in the meantime, I will provide written answers to them and send them to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. People, I know you haven't seen the chat.
I'm sorry for time management.
No, we had tech issues and you haven't been able to read the chat, but people have really appreciated what you've had to say and share today. And they're very excited about the opportunity for a follow-up.
Okay.
And I'll share the chat with you. You almost got done.
Okay.
But we should have known. There's so many questions. People love to dig into this stuff with you. So a follow-up webinar is going to be awesome for people. So thank you so much.
Okay. You bet. Absolutely.
All right. And thank you all for attending. I'm going to stick around to make sure I've got all the comments and copy that chat over. But feel free to head on over to your next session.